Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to show you how to paint watercolor gladiolus. Gladiolus are one of the birth month flowers for the month of August, and I cannot wait to show you how I painted this. For this project you will need watercolor paper. This is 140-pound cold press paper. I am using a size 10 and a size 4 round brush, and I am using my limited palette of watercolor paints. This is cad yellow, magenta, cerulean, indigo, and sap green. Okay, let's get started. So gladiolus is a flower that is in the iris family, and it kind of looks to me like a hibiscus merged with a lily in some variations. So it has these big, beautiful, fluffy petals, and then the rest of the flower kind of comes back really long, almost like a trumpet. So what I want to do first is I want to take a color, and you could really use any color. Here I'm using a very light wash of cad yellow mixed with a tiny bit of magenta so that I have a little bit of a yellow-orange feel, but again, this is very light. So my goal with the overall shape is to create these circular, uneven petals that go around in a circle, leaving the centers open. So even though I'm trying to keep this flower very light in value, you can pick up more colors or variations of color. Like you can see I've picked up some of the lighter orange color and add that to the flower while it's still wet so that you get a lot of dimension within such a flat subject. Now on the gladiolus plant, the flowers are bigger and fluffier toward the bottom, and then they become closed off more like buds as we get toward the top of the plant. So I'm doing these very small strokes to represent some buds up as we get closer to the top of the paper. The centers of our gladiolus flowers are representing how the flower is going deep and creating a trumpet and attaching to the stem. So by adding a little bit of magenta to our cad yellow and getting a deeper orange color, I can add this color while the flowers are still wet up above the center that we've left open to create dimension and represent shadow as the flowers are going down and creating that trumpet. I can also add some of this color to the bottom of our buds to give more dimension there as well. For the greenery, I wanted to start really light. So this is cad yellow mixed in with sap green, but it's very leaning yellow. It's a very light color, and I love how this plays with the lightness of our flowers. Now the main stalk of the plant is going straight up through the middle of the flowers, and then the greenery is attaching to each end of the flower buds and our main fluffy flowers. One of the funnest parts about gladiolus, I think, is that the greenery is very intense and really wraps around the flowers, especially the buds. So don't just attach it with a small stem, really give some thickness to the greenery as it's connecting to the flowers, and maybe even a little bit of a sheath or a little side leaf that's kind of coming up around the buds. Now, the greenery that is connecting our bigger flowers is a little bit more hidden, and so we're doing some odd shapes to reference those connections. And then the leaves, we can use the shape of our size 10 brush to start at the tip, push down on the body of the brush, drag it for as long as you want the shape of the leaf, and then release by coming up onto the tip with light pressure again. We can also create other shapes coming from behind some of the flowers to represent leaves that are in the back. So once we have this base light greenery, we are going to add some indigo into our green mixture to get a slightly darker green that leans more blue. I love adding this darker color into my lighter base when it is still a little bit wet, but I also don't mind the harder lines because we will have that as some of these areas have dried. My goal with the darker greenery is to create shadows and add dimension within my lighter areas so that it is not looking very flat. I am adding some color at each of the attachment points where the greenery is attaching to the flower buds and the green buds, coming down the stem, and then a little bit on the leaves. We just want to accent the lighter green without completely losing it. Now we're going to let our greenery completely dry while we work on the centers of our flowers, because now our flowers have completely dried. So again, using a mixture of cad yellow and magenta, leaning more toward the magenta this time to get a deeper reddish orange, we're going to use our size 4 round brush to create very thin stamen at the center point of each of these bigger, fluffier flowers. I'm doing anywhere between 3 and 5 lines, keeping it really simple and bringing it up out of the circle that we left open. For the ends of the stamens, the filaments, we want a slightly darker red color, so adding a little bit of blue will help you get that color. I added some purple that was already on my palette, but we're going to do these rectangle shapes that come downward off of the end of the stamen. Now we're going to work on adding more dimension in the flower. So at the point where the stamen are coming out of the center, we want to create a little bit of a shadow. So I'm creating some deeper reddish orange color, adding that down at that base area where we want it to look like it's deep and shadowy and it's going down into that trumpet shape. I can also use some of this orange color, swipe it on the buds to give dimension there as well, and I love the light, medium, and darker value that we have going on with the buds. Then, because the flower petals feel very flat, and that's normal, we're going to add light washes of color or glaze, it's called in watercolor, where we can change the way something looks by glazing another color over it. So here I'm glazing a light orangish color using cad yellow and my magenta, but the key is that it is very watery and it is a very light color. You also want to make sure that with glazes your lightest colors remain and that you're not covering them up. So we're going to let that dry before we add more glaze colors over the top because we don't want them to blend together. Now, I have mixed indigo into my green, and it is a lot more heavy on the indigo, very blue this time, but you can see that when I'm adding it, it's very minimal. We can still see our light yellow-green color. We definitely can see our main medium value of green, but now we are using the deeper bluish indigo to add depth, contrast, interest, and just that final pop of color that we need. Now that our layers on our flowers have completely dried, we can add another glaze that is slightly darker. So this one has a little bit more pink to it, but again, with the glaze, you want it to be watery and you want it to not blend with the glazes underneath so that we also have layers within our flowers of light, medium, and dark values, and we can start to see a buildup of color, and it's nice to see some of the harder lines, especially in lighter values. Lighter values having the hard lines layered and dried up against each other looks so nice with watercolor. It makes it look like you really thought the painting out. I'm using some of the light value in a few areas around the petals, keeping those lighter values intact, and then I'm also adding some of this lighter color onto the buds as well. Adding some indigo into your magenta will create a deep purple color, and you can add this to continue to create dimension right at the base of the centers of the flowers, where again it is going deep into the center, and we have a nice purpley contrast here, which is so eye-catching with all of the light colors, and we can bring a little bit of that color up into the stamen and a bit on the filaments to really make it feel cohesive and finished off. And that is our gladiolus finished. Thank you so much for painting with me today. I'm going to write gladiolus in August because this is part of my birth month flower series, but it is never a bad time to paint gladiolus flowers, and I hope you enjoy it. I will see you all next time. Bye guys.